Well, good afternoon. Oh man, it's so good to be talking to our business partners from OrbVest. It's been 6 months since we last had an update. Many members of the BizNews tribe are invested in OrbVest, and I think for the vast majority, very happily so. They started investing some years ago when the Rand was a lot stronger than it is today. But OrbVest has made some interesting changes over the last 6 months. In fact, when we last spoke, it was a discussion about the new Accretive brand that had been introduced. Today, though, we're going to be talking about a whole new opportunity in Texas. Now, welcome, first of all, the CEO, Martin Freeman, who's in the US, and Justin Clarke, who's the Chief Operating Officer, who's based in South Africa. Gents, I've just got back from the United States, and the last day we were there was the same day where Donald Trump's attempted assassination occurred. So I can give you lots of stories of how a South African thinks about the US, but today we're going to be looking at the really good part of America, and that is the opportunities that now exist with office buildings that are empty, but for those who, don't own the office buildings in the first place, and you guys have invested in medical property, so we can talk about that and how that's been performing relative to commercial real estate generally. And then secondly, the opportunities that are now available from these office buildings that are standing empty but can be acquired cheaply and converted, presumably in your case, into medical properties. There are a lot of South Africans who kind of get it now. They've been with you. A lot of our BizNews tribe members have been with you a long time. They get what you're about, and they will be very interested in finding out more about the opportunity, particularly the one you've got in San Antonio in South Texas today. But before we go there, and before I even introduce Martin and Justin formally, Stuart Lohman, my colleague, is going to take us through the tech to make sure that everybody can hear us and can participate in this webinar.
Excellent. Thank you, Alec. Those new to the webinars, if you look on that control panel on the bottom of your screen, there's a little high five. It's called a raise hand option. If you can just give me a few raised hands. If you can hear my voice coming through and see 3 good-looking gentlemen on screen. There we go. Excellent stuff. I know Alec likes to.
Okay.
He likes to keep things conversational. There's a little Q&A option on that same control panel. If you please put your questions in there, we can get started. Excellent, Alec. Thanks. All good on the tech side.
Okay, so Stu, in other words, if I put my glasses on, then there'll be 4 good-looking guys on screen. Is that right? Is that what you were saying?
Well, I'm the only one with glasses, Alec.
Brilliant. Okay, well, Martin, it's been a while since we've managed to catch up. How's the US treating you?
Well, Alec, firstly, thanks again for having me on the webinar today. Well, at the moment, it's treating me exceptionally well. As you know, I'm in New York City. We are certainly in the middle of a very warm, wonderful summer. And as I always say to people, that in New York at this time of the year, you certainly can't get bored. There's lots of activities. But on a wider perspective, we're in the middle of some fascinating times with the presidential election. And that is certainly consuming the media stage 24 hours a day.
Surely consuming your discussions as well when you go out for lunches or business dinners and even amongst your family. The conversation can't be too far away from Trump and Biden right now, both of whom have had a very active past few weeks.
Well, you know, Alec, we're very spoiled for choice at the moment. But my own personal view is I think that, the Democrats are really in disarray at the moment right now, trying to figure out whether Biden should stay or go or be pushed out. Everyone I speak to feels that it's the typical US scenario. And they explain to me that the US either moves too far left every couple of years, and then the Republicans come in, or the Republicans then move too far right, and the Democrats then have their turn. But this time in particular, with so many things so contentious and immigration, the border, etc., it certainly seems that the Republicans have the tailwinds behind them.
It certainly does, and whatever poll you want to look at is going to tells you that even before the assassination attempt, Trump was likely to win. My own personal poll, having been in Washington last week, was walking into the retail outlets that sell memorabilia, and there were, and this is Washington, D.C., which is a Democrat enclave, if you like. There were Trump caps, Trump shirts, anything to do with Trump just being pushed in your face, and pretty much nothing from the Biden side. So retailers, even though their sympathies might be with the blue team, they certainly were selling the red team or pushing the red team, which presumably is selling better. So it tells you something.
Just to give everyone a feel that I think the typical discussion is around the age of the candidates, and I think everyone understands it. I think that these two individuals have forced their way onto the stage and made sure that they are the nominees. But I can hear everybody saying, and you can see by the vice presidents, it's a completely different age. I mean, J.D. Vance, if I'm not mistaken, is 39 years old. So you're going to see a younger generation coming through where I think that the public is very supportive of that in 4 years' time.
Almost half the age. In fact, he is half the age of his running mate. Justin, from your side, you here in, well, not so sunny South Africa at the moment, although based in Durban, it's never cold where you come from.
Well, we're on the other side of our elections, Alec, and we've got the GNU to look forward to as long as it holds. And my gosh, a strengthening rand, and we haven't been able to say that for a hell of a long time. Long may it hold. And an opportunity, Alec, for guys that have been telling us, no, we can't move money at 19, 18, and 19. So yeah, long live South Africa.
Yeah, I must tell you, coming home, having the perspective from offshore, I'm feeling a lot more positive about our country. At least the slide seems to be pretty much over, and we've got the potential now to go back up. But as you know, in investing, you have to diversify. You have to. You can't say, well, let's put all our eggs into the South African basket, even though Magnus Haystack has, for the first time, shown some kind of interest in investing locally. I think the first time in maybe 15 years. But on the other hand, we do know that the rand is, our currency is in a long-term weaker trend, whatever happens to the politics, and it really is determined by inflation differentials. So there we have it, and hence the very strong endorsement that we have for our partners at OrbVest and for what they're doing in the medical property field. So Justin, 6 months ago, we spoke about Accretive, and there were some quite difficult questions that were raised then, but it does appear, and I know I've been following the story because so many of our tribe are investors in OrbVest, and it does appear as though you guys have overcome those hurdles quite well. Before we go into the newest opportunity, just bring us up to date, if you would, please.
Yeah, I think, Alec, we migrated away from single buildings, and I think we became extremely concerned about the risk that investors were getting into on a single building. Bear in mind that nothing is a straight line in real estate, and we certainly learned some quite expensive lessons, and we decided that it would be in our investors' better interest if we put together a little very focused fund, and that is the wrong word, as you well know, but consolidating all of our best assets. And that's where that Accretive brand came from. And we thought that investors would love it and they'd come piling in, and the institutions would come piling in. It's been a lot slower than we thought. And we kind of were of the view that it's, a lot of the South African investors are sitting on the sidelines, keeping their ammunition, or alternatively, it's exchange rate or whatever. And we got pushed by some of the big investors to say, listen, this is a little bit pedestrian, the 10s and 12s, that's kind of not going to get us out of bed. We've got other options. Go and find us some super exciting stuff. And at the same time, as you know, we were dealing with this investor, this Honan guy that collapsed on us. And we were pursuing some of the buildings that had gone into liquidation. And this was one of the early ones that got put into a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And it was remarkable. I mean, I'm going to hand over to Martin to tell the story of how we secured this thing. I mean, it's a bizarre and a very long story, Alec, and it's perhaps a lesson of perseverance. But I think that it's indicative of the US, and we talked about this roller coaster. This particular building that we're gonna talk about today. at the time when it was at its heyday, it was probably worth $80 million. In fact, I think it was appraised at over 100, Martin, but with some vacancy filled. And we'll talk to you a little bit about how much value has been destroyed in this building. Purely, well, not purely, there's two reasons, but because of the interest rate and because of the cycle and the lack of appetite for office at the moment. But it is a very, very interesting story. And Martin, if you don't mind, Alec, I'm going to bring him in because he's the one who persevered. Long after we said, Martin, you're wasting your time, leave it. But Martin, tell us a little bit about this ridiculous journey of yours.
So, I just want to add to what Justin said, the journey with Accretive, and I wasn't sure whether I was actually going to put my OrbVest background today or Accretive. So generally going forward, you'll see Accretive. It has been a wonderful journey. The deals in the portfolio, the performing assets that really, at this stage, I think the overall portfolio is now sitting close to 94% leased. You're talking across nearly 7-8 states in the US. And significant value, and so it continues to produce constant dividends. We're very proud of it, and as Justin said, whilst pedestrian, I'll use a different analogy. People have got two options at the moment. They can either invest in high growth and look for the big returns, or they can invest in stable, consistent dividends. And so we always encourage people, just what you said, diversify. If you've got, for example, $100,000, put $50,000 into the Accretive portfolio. You're across multiple buildings, over 150 tenants in the US, over 8 states, and it's really just underpinned by good, solid fundamentals. And then look for other exciting stuff. And so that's how we get to the story of that. So I just want to park Accretive separate to that. So Alec, this journey, Justin said, he's quite right. I've always told our investors that we will always go the extra mile to do the right thing for them. And I think this certainly demonstrates it. Over a period of 2 years, we have tracked this building. We have submitted multiple LOIs, which is called letters of intent. So when this whole episode started to unfold, what happened was you had what's known as a ground lease. It's quite strange in the US. What they do is they separate the building from the ground. So if you own a house somewhere in South Africa, you can actually sell your ground to someone, and then you own the building on top of it. And so this ground lease had a ground lessor, and then you had a bank on top of that. And that bank is a very well-known, massive bank in the US that extended a loan for $53 million. And the ground lease was $20 million. So that's why you get these massive valuations. The actual building itself is 2 11-story buildings, 300,000 square feet, enormous, deal. And so as we moved along, the bank kept rejecting our offers to acquire these buildings at a discount. And so what happened is, as the interest rates moved up and inflation moved up in the US, so the appetite for real estate just stalled, because that's just what happened in the real estate market. It was in flux. There was misalignment because, remember, the seller thinks he's going to get a certain price. The buyer is saying, well, interest rates are a lot more. I'm going to get it at an opportunistic price. And there's a disconnect. And so that's the reason why volume stalled. Thank goodness we saw in the last week that the Fed's initiative to drive inflation back to 2% is absolutely working. And we're now approaching really the 2s. And so off the back of that, interest rates will start to reduce in the coming months. That's their indication, not mine. And so what happened was, it's a strange story in America, and this is the reason we're online today. I would have never believed it. The players who play in the distressed state space said to me that what will happen eventually is the bank will write their asset down to almost zero, and in their books, eventually an order will come from the top, and they will just hand back the keys. And I said, that would be illogical. Why would a bank go and write off $53 million, even if they can sell it for $5 million? They said, because the embarrassment of going and selling it for $5 million, it's never going to happen in the US. Sometimes it's just cleaner. They just hand back the keys. They walk away. Nobody even knows about it. And they've cleaned up their balance sheet. So about a year ago, the bank walked into the court and said, we're handing it over to the ground lessor. And much to my shock, they just walked away. And the ground lessor said, fantastic. We had been in discussions with the ground lessor. So we immediately went to the ground lessor and started to engage with them. and I managed to get a provisional deal. And we submitted another LOI, letter of intent. And so don't forget, now we're down to like 20 something million. The ground lessor wanted it at 27 million. And we started to engage. And we were about to do a deal. In December, they turned around and said, you know what? We think there's value in this. We're going to probably decide to do it ourselves, or we'll sell it on the open market. Deal on, deal off. This had been going on. And to fast forward, about 8 weeks ago, eventually I said to my team, listen, I've tried. I've done everything I can do. I've chased this thing for 2 years. It's just not meant to be. And lo and behold, I'm coming back from Boston on a trip, and I get an email, and the email says, hi, you may find the story very interesting on these buildings in San Antonio. I've found out about you. Give me a call in the morning. Well, I'm fascinated. I pick up the phone. It's one of the top 10 banks in the US. They said to me, we found out about your multiple LOIs, letter of intents. We know that you have interest in this building. Unbeknownst to everyone, we were the actual funder of the ground lease of these buildings. We, given the slow progress on these buildings, have decided to take them back and kick everyone else out. We've checked you out. We've watched you on your webinars. We think you would be a great partner. We are just a bank. Do you want to do something with us? I couldn't believe it. I jumped on a plane, flew across the country, went to go see them on 2 occasions, and basically managed to, number one, get their buy-in and their trust, because that's what it's all about. They themselves put money into the deal, and they have a passive fund, which means they are not in the real estate. They've just got investors just like us who just want to earn consistent dividends and make sure their money's safe. So we'll go into the actual commercials of the deal now, which are simply bizarre and at ridiculous prices. And I'll end off and say the following. When people have a sale in America, they have a sale that South Africans just cannot understand. I mean, you can have literally a pair of shoes or a jacket that's $1,000. When you get to the end of winter and they need to get rid of it, they will sell it at any price. Whether it's $50, $40, $30, they just got to get the stock out their warehouse because the next season's coming around. And so that's pretty much similar to this crazy story you're going to hear about today. Justin, over to you.
Before you carry on, maybe those who are coming to the webinar for the first time don't really know OrbVest or Accretive or Martin or Justin. So just by way of background, we've been business partners with you for a decade now. It's incredible how long it's we've been together. And you have focused in the United States on medical buildings. That's why your leases or your lease percentage is in the 90s. If you had focused on commercial properties, for argument's sake, you'd been, instead of being specialized in where you are, if you'd said, okay, come South Africans, come BizNews community, invest in commercial buildings in the United States with us, what kind of percentage might you have now? Because given what we're going to hear in a moment about these buildings, which are commercial buildings, there seems to be a massive difference. Also, from what I saw, walking around various offices in the United States, where people aren't going back to work anymore. They aren't going back to the office in the way that the owners of the companies hope they would, which has got to be putting a lot of stress in time on the values of commercial or office buildings.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head. So I think COVID, work from home, just fundamentals of the US economy have changed dramatically. People don't need as much space. They're not coming into the office 5 days a week. I must say, though, it's starting to change. It was originally 2 days, then it went to 3 days. And somebody said something to me very interesting. They said, when you have an oversupply of jobs versus employees, the pendulum has tilted. When that inverts, what you're going to find is companies turning around and saying, for culture-wise, you want to work with us, you need to be in the office. So you can already see most companies have gone back to 3 days a week. Where that ends, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing. You asked a good question. What would the percentage be? Well, it depends what niche and what your strategy is. If you go, for example, into industrial, you have a single tenant who takes your warehouse, and it's always 100% leased. If you go for multifamily, it's 92% leased. And there are many buildings in America which I think are well leased in office, call it 80% and above. But what it's got to, Alec, is the raw construction costs and inflation. So if you had to construct right now at $300-400 a square, okay, and that's probably being conservative, you have to be charging $30-40 a square in terms of rent to get your money back. So people who have existing buildings in that space are finding it very challenging, because along comes players like OrbVest and others. You buy a building at a massive discount, and you say to the BizNews, for example, as a tenant, come into our building, the rent in the area is $30-40, we'll give it to you at $25. Now, we can offer you a lot more, we can offer you an amazing deal, and why wouldn't you move? Because as long as you're in a great building, in a great location, if you can save half your rent, you're going to do it.
Well, that kind of puts it in perspective. Let's talk about the opportunity. You've mentioned already San Antonio in Texas. Justin, thanks to our Zoom that we use nowadays. In the past, you always had to send me the slides. I would have to click when you told me when to click. This time you can manage it yourself. So over to you.
Thanks for that, Alec. Yeah. So yeah, to your rule, Alec, we've just got one or two slides, I guess, to just set the tone. This is not an in-depth look into it, but just let me get this thing to play when I can get rid of the. That's better. Rightio. So, Alec, just before we kick off, obviously we are a registered financial service provider, so we do have to let everyone know that, and obviously information that we provide here is based on best efforts, and we do recommend that before anyone makes any investment, that they do actually get advice from a professional. But moving on, this is what these towers look like. And I must say, the first time that I visited them, I thought, my gosh, is it even possible that a bunch of South Africans could actually control these assets? They really are quite stunning buildings, concrete and steel, 11-story. But most interesting, they sit on this, which was a ground lease of 13 acres of land, which is a further opportunity to sell off or develop the additional land. So a very, very spectacular piece of real estate. And I think that at the price that we have achieved and we have secured it at, we have had to put down $10 a square foot. Martin mentioned earlier on that construction costs on tower is actually above $300 a square foot. In fact, replacement cost on these buildings is more like $500 a square foot. To be buying them at $40 a square foot all in is a massive and significant discount. And that's why we are kind of smiling a little bit on this webinar today, Alec. It's all about fundamentals, value investing, to coin your phrase. So I think let's get into a little bit of the detail of it. All right. So this is the location, and I think that the original developer was in the process of converting it to a medical building, and the reason is the location. If you have a look at the building, at the image on the left there, you'll see all of the little red stars are effectively medical buildings. This is right next to the South Texas Medical Center, which is one of the biggest employers apart from the military in San Antonio. And perhaps a couple of very interesting little stats on San Antonio while we're here, because people don't really know that name. You're familiar with the big cities, but you're not familiar with the next tier down. So it is the 7th biggest city nationally. It's got 7 military bases in San Antonio, about 2.6 million people. I think it's the 2nd largest city in Texas, behind Houston. 4 Fortune 500 companies, including US Insurance, USAA, which, if you have a look here, is sitting over there. You can see the little block called USAA on the right-hand image. And that employs 27,000 to 30,000 people. South Texas Medical Center employs about 35,000 people. So within the vicinity, sandwiched with the little star here, sandwiched between the little star and the USAA and the Texas Medical Center are two of the bigger employers in San Antonio. So quite fascinating that. Certainly it talks to the fundamentals here. We've structured the project as follows. There are 3 buildings. We've broken it into 3 different phases. The first one is Tower 1, and we intend to move the remaining tenants in Tower 1 into Tower 2. These are, at this stage, office tenants. There are a bunch of medical tenants in Tower 2, but we're not considering this to be a medical building. We are in a value play space now, and we are, for this particular opportunity, we're just going to fill that building as quickly as we can until we get to 75 to 79% occupancy. And we're going to do that, as Martin said earlier, just by undercutting rental rates in the area. So we think that's super achievable and not a great deal of risk in it. The second building is really interesting, Alec, and you might have heard this in the US. There is a lot of demand for residential, especially sort of apartments. In other words, lower end residential. And there is a shortage of new supply coming onto the market because of the cost of construction. So you're getting a lot of conversions and renovations of multifamily. And this tower lends itself to a conversion. We've got brilliant partners that are doing this, and we'll talk a little bit about them. And they're going to convert Tower 1 into 231 micro apartments. And then obviously there's the third portion, which is the land, which of course there's various opportunities for. At this stage, we just modeled it on selling it off. Martin mentioned a little bit the bank that was the owner of the top structures, or the leasehold as we call it, wrote off $53 million. And I think it's very interesting to understand that we are in fact in partnership with one of the top 10 banks to redevelop this property. So it is our partners, Triple Double, and ourselves, and of course the bank who is going to be redeveloping the property. Ultimately, $3 million up front, and then the bank has deferred $9 million of the funds of the purchase price till we sell off the buildings at the end, which brings the total purchase price to $12 million. So there's $12 million, valuation several years ago, $80 million. $10 a square foot is the upfront fee, as we mentioned, and there's a little bit of interest that is due and payable on some of the remaining funds, and that would take it up to about 34, an additional 34. So $44 a square foot. This is a significant value play. Going to run through this super quickly. I'm not going to get into the detail, but these are the guys that are behind it. And I think the most important thing is, are they able to do this? And the answer is, this is what they do for a living. This is actually other conversions they're busy with at the moment in San Antonio. They've got a team on the ground. They pump these things out. It's highly successful. They convert them into these mini condos with a lot of useful space downstairs, lounges, restaurants, gyms, pool facilities, etc. And Martin, this is actually a place that you've been to, one of their facilities. I think you took these with your iPhone. Look pretty good. Maybe you can just take over and talk a little bit about them.
Yeah, so Alec, I think that the most important thing is, as Justin mentioned, just to reiterate, you're getting this at the most ridiculous, stupid scenario of $10 a square, and the bank, I got them to agree that the remaining $30, which is in total $40 a square, will be paid only in 3, 4, 5 years' time when we sell. So you're getting no debt, no ground lease, nothing. It's all gone away. There is no debt on this transaction, which is phenomenal. And hence the reason why it's so easy to see that, if you do a reasonable job here, the upside is absolutely huge. So in terms of Triple Double and our partners, this is what they do. They buy deals directly from the REITs and from the banks when they have issues. And their whole thing is that we are together as a team. We are the managing partners in the deal in terms of doing everything start to finish, the leasing, everything. And so when you are agnostic to other brokers and other people in the industry, in the area, it means any tenant in the entire of San Antonio can come to us and we will do a sweetheart deal for them. We've also modeled that whatever they would get as a tenant installation allowance when you sign a lease, we will offer more than any other landlord will. So that's the reason why there's such a big edge. And of course, without any debt, as you know, Alec, I mean, that's the key to real estate. If you could buy everything for cash, you know, it really is a game changer. And so investors have the opportunity to invest not only alongside institutional grade players and opportunities that are already reserved for the ultra high net worths and the large funds in America, but we have a once-off situation that you actually have a bank as a partner. So to give you an idea, the bank, when this transaction closes, all the money will go into a lockbox. Any draws, the bank will be part of a almost like a board that will sign off on all drawdowns and make sure everything's being spent in the right direction. And then in terms of the conversion, I went to this particular asset in Orlando. It is just amazing. It's fantastic. And when you get things at the right price, for example, when you're supposed to be paying $2,000 for your rental unit, and they are able to offer these at $1,500, $1,600, well, you can understand why they lease them up exceptionally quickly. And so that's really the play on this. We will then move forward just in terms of some of the economics. I'll run through it very quickly. You know, people are able to invest the money. We're raising $6 million. We've already raised a huge chunk of it, and there's limited space left. But what happens then is that I have further managed to negotiate a very sweet thing for the investors. And that is that the moment we sell the first building, the investors will get all their capital back, plus a kicker of 50%, hopefully, of their amount. So, for example, if we raise $6 million, we'll pay back the $6 million. We'll then generate another $3 million profit. We'll pay it back to the investors. And then we go on to the second phase. So at that point, all the investors have got back their money. They've made a profit, and everything else is just icing on the cake. And the reason why I managed to convince the bank is I said to them, listen, if you're going to have people bringing in money, they have to get their money back first. You as a bank, you're a long-term player, and they were fine with that. And so, again, it's come down to building a relationship. What then happens is when the second building is then filled and sold, it will generate the next 50%. So technically, if you've made 100%, we're projecting on people's money. If you do it over 5 years, it's 20% a year. And if you conclude the project over 4 years, it's an ROI of 25% a year. And so we believe this is really an exceptional situation. To quote the words of my partners, Avi and Donnie, Avi used the analogy. He said, imagine if you live in a complex and the properties are 5 million Rand to buy your house. And suddenly you find that the one down the road is at 500,000 Rand. Well, everyone's going to run and they're going to buy it. And he said, even in his time buying distressed assets, this is such a unique transaction that you just don't get value as low as this.
Sounds amazing. It's clearly opportunistic, but it is a diversion from where you've been. OrbVest has always been, we're investing in medical properties in the United States. So as a South African investor, you say, great, I love it because medical's safe, it's solid, I get good returns, not spectacular, exactly as you said earlier, Justin, although for a South African getting 10% in US dollars is spectacular, but park that on the one side. You're moving outside of that very focused niche area. And I'd like to know why. I'd like to know why you've decided to do this, because this is different. This has to bring in, the returns look amazing, but it has to bring in a new type of risk for the kind of investor that OrbVest has attracted, certainly from the BizNews tribe.
So I'll jump in and say the following is that, you know, people want diversification. And so we've heard a consistent message and a theme from everyone to say, listen, there's a part of our money, as we said before, that we're happy to put in to get the stable, consistent returns. But everybody's saying there's opportunity in America. Why are you not presenting it to us? And we always said the same thing. It goes down to you make your money on a building when you buy it on day one. Hopefully that's it. You buy right. Now, we didn't go chasing this in terms of expecting it to be such a ridiculous deal. We just thought we would get it at a reasonable price. We'd put in medical tenants on the first building, and that would be the play. Now that you've got it at such a cheap price, remember, it's opposite the medical center. So, of course, we're going to go and we're going to try and attract everyone. Why? Because when you sell a medical building at an exit, you'll get more for a medical building. But if someone comes to us and wants to take an entire floor, whether they're medical or not, we don't mind because you've bought it at such a low basis that the economics are just ridiculously cheap. And so that's the reason why. So to answer your question directly, we've gone down the road on this on a value play. We would love to be all medical, but money is money when you can make a good solid profit. And then on the residential side, that is what our partners do. And we believe diversification is something that our investors have asked for, and they're certainly demonstrating it with their commitments at the moment.
So in other words, the South African investors have now got comfort with OrbVest over the last decade. They know that they can trust you. They know that Martin's been in the US for how long now, Martin? How many years have you been?
7 years.
Wow. So for 7 years, you've been operating in the United States. You've gotten to know the market better and better. You are still focused on those medical buildings, which is the bulk of the portfolio. But here comes an opportunity as a result or as a consequence, perhaps, of COVID, people going to work from home. Interesting what you say about people going back to the office. We'll have to see if that works out the way that the companies want it, or the people who've taken those leases, or not. But in this case, the opportunity is just too good to miss, because there's been such a massive write-down, and because you are really getting what's it, 12 acres, I think you said earlier, plus the 2 big office blocks at substantially lower than the replacement cost, actually a fraction of the replacement cost. So you're saying, let's give this to our investors. They will understand, because they have a relationship with us, that we're not selling them a pup, that we actually are really passing on the benefits of our experience. I'll just give you one little aside on this, and let me know if it's something similar. I read in the last few days about a guy who was watching Picasso doodle on a napkin in a Paris bistro on the outside in summer. And he went to Picasso and he said, "Can I take that napkin? Can I have the napkin?" And Picasso says, "It's yours for 25,000 francs. And the guy said, "But it took you 5 minutes to do it." And Picasso said, no. It took me 40 years to do it. And there's a similar story, I think, here. If you just arrived in the United States, clearly this opportunity wouldn't have come to you, or it would have been most unusual, because you have been pursuing it. You're there, you're getting to know the market better. You've paid your school fees, kind of thing. Is this like the Picasso story, that it's not just, it hasn't just arrived now, it's been at least 7 years in gestation?
Yeah, I'll finish off on that one, Alec. You know, the reason why we pursued this is because we wanted to recover some money that we'd lost on the transaction way back in the day. Some of the early lessons, as you say, of arriving in a country and trying to learn your way around. I think that that is why we pursued it. And then this thing landed on our lap at a price considerably lower than we would have been prepared to pay if it was a year ago. And I think similarly, at the same time, we have investors saying, "Listen, there's stuff going on in the US. Can't you find me a building?" And especially the I want to say institutional family office type guys that are saying, "Go find me a building that I can fix and repair and rehabilitate, seeing the market is so bad." And these two things happen simultaneously. This thing landed on our lap at a massive discount. And so I think that really is the best answer.
Justin, I want to add to that, and I want to say, something we haven't discussed is, in the last week, I've been approached by one of the big players in New York who has said to me, "I'll take the entire $6 million equity." And that's something that we haven't mentioned. And, Justin and I have always been passionate about building a community and helping the small investor invest alongside the big player. And it's something that we will always stick to. And as we've moved along this path, so you'll probably see other opportunistic scenarios arise. We will offer it to people, but only on the basis, on the lessons we've learned to date. And make no mistake, I want to reiterate, as Justin has said a few times on this webinar, real estate is not a straight line, and things happen. And people need to understand that any business, there are always risks involved. But as long as you can manage those risks, or as long as you can take calculated risks. So if you want your money to be stable, consistent, earning dividends, that's the accretive portfolio, 100%. But bearing in mind that it's heartbreaking when people come to us with $200,000 and they say, "Right, we're giving you 75. And by the way, there's someone down the road who we're giving something else to because they've just got a different opportunity. I need to spread my risk." So we've said at the right time, we will start to look to offer other aspects, but in a very slow, measured approach. And make no mistakes, those are going to be really great value.
You do say there the minimum investment's $50,000, but BizNews exception. Help us there, Justin. What's the exception? What's the entry fee for the club?
Alec, we made the minimum very high because we want to make sure that we don't get I want to say retail investors that can't afford to take the risk, if I want to put it that way. We wanted to make it exclusive and not for the very small investors, unfortunately. We do, however, have a significant amount of BizNews investors, and we wanted to make it available to offer something special. So, we're prepared to drop that minimum, and I'm going to leave it a little bit open to our consultants to ask a couple of questions, because as a registered financial service provider, we've got to make sure that you can actually afford to make the investment without putting too much of your assets at risk. So I think we're going to we'll treat it by a person by person, but we're prepared to take a significantly smaller amount from BizNews investors that are already part of our tribe, if you want to call it that, Alec.
So let me just get this straight. If there's a community member of ours who has money in Accretive and perhaps in some of the other OrbVest assets, and they've got $5,000 left on their offshore allowance, they can still talk to you.
Absolutely. I think what we want to avoid is we had a significant amount of retirees that put their pension money with us a little while back. And we're very uncomfortable with that situation, because if you are, and in those days it was in a single building, and that's why we drove towards the Accretive portfolio. But we're trying to avoid that kind of investor. It's not the right profile, it's not the right investment for a retiree. And I know it's attractive if you're earning 7% cash on cash. Go into the portfolio, but this is not for you.
Okay, got it. So this is the opportunistic one rather than the accretive. So if you want to earn almost like a utility, you're investing in, because of the massive diversification, you'll get a 7% return, say, in dollars. But this one, it could be substantially higher if the planets align in the way that you guys are seeing it. They should, Martin.
Yeah, so to reiterate, if I can, sorry, Martin, I'm going to reiterate. The plan is 2x, Alec, and I think that Martin mentioned that there are three components. The first one is the Tower 2, and that is going to be a speed lease based on a discount price. We don't care who the tenants are, we're going to put them in, we'll put a call center in, whatever we need to do. As soon as it gets up to 75%, which we expect to be within 3 years, according to the leasing plan, we're going to flog that building on. And that will generate, and what maybe you want to talk about the numbers, but our assumption is we could sell it for around about 15. We give the bank 5, we give the investors 6 and 50% profit to make it another 3, and effectively that's made everyone very, very happy in the first 3 years. And then the remaining bit is completing the multifamily, and of course whatever we do on the land, either selling it off or that. So the first phase is super important, and we hope to get that done in 3 years. So 2x in 3 years, if we get that right, we're all going to be super happy as investors in this project.
I just want to clarify something you said, Justin. This was also part of my discussions, Alec, which I'm quite proud of, is that when I was discussing it with the bank, we spoke about that remaining $30 a square, the 9 million. How do you get to that? It's 300,000 squares at $30 is the remaining 9. That's how you get to it. The initial upfront was $10, 300,000 squares is 3 million. They wanted skin in the game on our behalf. And so instead of them saying, the moment you sell the building, I want the entire amount, what we managed to negotiate was the fact that we will go down this path. And the moment you have sold a building, we will actually segment it into 4 for the building, 4 for the other building, and 1 for the land. So it means that our investors actually stand ahead of the bank getting all their money back, which is so rare. It's so unique. But I think, as I said, many times, it goes down to the fact they want ultimately a partner who is going to be able to come in and assist them and to be able to make sure that this achieves the objectives.
We've got 15 minutes left and open now for questions. Just to remind you that we will keep your anonymity. So if you put your question in the box, I'll pick them up and pose them to Martin and Justin, and only use your first name. But you're going to need to do it very quickly because I don't see any questions at the moment. Gents, maybe you guys have done so well that you've answered them all before anyone can even ask any. But it does appear to be a very simple investment opportunity here. You know that you're going in, you're buying low, and even though Accretive and OrbVest is a portfolio which gives you a utility type return in hard currency, hence the appeal to South African investors, this one is something else. It would be a potentially a far better return, but on the other hand, there has to be risk as well. And I guess that's really my question. Where is the risk in this? If you are buying it so low, and why is it you? Why are you guys getting the inside track and not somebody else?
I'll tell you what, Martin, I'll lead off on this one. I wanted to mention another thing, and then I'll pass over you to this wrap that's on the screen here. But what I did want to mention, Martin, Stuart has posted on the links on the chat, 2 links there, and I think it's super important that we get anybody who's interested to enter via those links, just so we know exactly that you are part of the tribe, in order for us to qualify you for less than 50 grand, if that's the case. But there's both links there. One is for Accretive, and obviously one is for Highpoint. So I just wanted to point those out. Have a look there on the chat at the bottom. And then yeah, to answer your question, Alec, what happens? How do buildings get into trouble? How do people lose their homes? Because they have debt. And I think that we are going into this building with zero debt. Remember that the bank is effectively pref equity, and they and at the point of acquiring it, we don't have debt on the building. We will put debt on it, obviously, for the multifamily, but remember that that's ring fenced to that particular building. So it's very hard to mess this thing up, even if at a worst case scenario you just struggle to get tenants and you can't, because the economy flattens out or whatever. So that's that's my view on it, is that fundamentally you don't have anyone who's going to step in and repossess the building from you because you haven't managed to service something. Even the rates, I mean, the rates are extremely high on these buildings, but now we're taking the value from 80 million down to 12 million, and the rates, we get a huge discount on the rates because of that. So everything just comes down, and fundamentally the value is fantastic. Anyway, sorry, Martin.
So Alec, I'm gonna deviate slightly, and I'm gonna take you and I back to a conversation that we had at your wonderful event in the Berg. And it was my immigration journey. Mm-hmm. And, I gave you the analogy that when you come over, you don't even know where to go to have a haircut. You have no network. And I think it's been an evolution of building a network and building your reputation here also. And that's tough. It takes a long time. And I think that over time, what's happened is, we've ended up in a position whereby we known, we have a brand. When we say something, it happens. And, it's something we're very proud of. And so what's happened is that this particular bank, when they took it back, remember, they're a bank. They're not in real estate. All they do is they provide the money and somebody else does whatever they say they're going to do. And so they had 2 choices. They had a particular crowd that they've worked with many times over the past decade that they were considering, and then they came across us. But they wanted somebody who had a bit of a passion, a vision, and who would go the extra mile. And so I think it's a heck of a coup for them to have elected us as their partners versus going with somebody else. And that's the biggest validation I could possibly think of, is having the bank say, we want you to be our partner.
So interesting. In the time that I've spent abroad, and we did spend 3 years in London for very different reasons than not emigrating, but well, there were reasons that we had to be there. I remember talking to people, and they said, once you've been in a country for, let's say, 6 years, so 7 years kind of qualifies as well, only then do you really know what's happening in business. Only then do people see you as actually someone who's going to be there indefinitely. Up until that point, you're often regarded as a inkomer, or a new, that's what they call it here where I live in the Overberg. If you haven't been here 30 years, you're an inkomer. You're just one of the newbies. And I guess in the international community, that is certainly the feedback that I had. So it shouldn't be a surprise to us that, given your track record, given the size of your portfolio, and you can just update us on that, that you would now be starting to get letters from people like you did in the bank. It's a surprise, and it's a delight, given that you wouldn't have got those letters in the past. But how big is the OrbVest or the Accretive portfolio now, Martin?
Well, I'll just add on to what you said. I always say to people, when you immigrate, year 1 and 2 is the honeymoon. Everything's shiny. It's fantastic. It's amazing. But I miss my friends and family. Year 3 and 4 are the tough years, when it's like, oh, wow. So I actually live here. Now I actually got to build a network. I got to actually educate my kids. I actually got to now set my future. And by the way, I still miss more than ever my friends and family back home. And then really from year 5 onwards, you start to feel like you're part of any country in the world. And that's the story of all immigrants that I speak to, whether it's here, UK, or Australia. And, in terms of OrbVest, we now over combined 300 million of value across 9 states. We ourselves this year will have done over 500 million square feet. And I think the brokers themselves are astounded. They're saying, in this kind of environment, for you to be doing transactions is amazing, because most of the other players are struggling to actually get the transaction value going. And so I think it's because our base is much wider. And then I'm going to end off and say one thing, Alec, that if the stars align further, you never know. Maybe we'll be having a discussion on other opportunities, given the fact that we've now hit that 7-year and the certain doors are opening. We'll see how that plays out in the next couple of months.
Martin Freeman, Justin Clarke from OrbVest, bringing us up to date on the latest opportunity. I think the guys have sold it pretty hard today, but it's very hard not to sell it hard, given the story that you've told us. And I guess it's one of perseverance as well. Not just, Martin, that you've been in the United States for a long time, but with this particular asset that you've been persevering and following it for quite a journey. I'm Alec Hogg from BizNews. Until the next time, cheerio.